Okay, let's pray.
Father in heaven, thank you for this opportunity to come together and study your word. Please help us to discern what is truth. Please guide us. Please help me to try and explain things correctly. Give me the words to speak. Bless our hearts that we are willing and able to accept truth for what it is. Open our eyes for these things you are trying to reveal to us, the symbols, the dates, the numbers, the structures and patterns, Lord. Help us to understand your will. Bless this presentation, and thank you, and we ask you these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
So yes, we're going to continue from last week. We were talking about the connection with Nero. We were talking about the 9/11 remark. We left off with the vision of Sister White, where she saw a fireball hitting Nashville. We suggested that this vision might be conditional. Because the people in there that she sees and people there are blaming those who knew it in advance. They blame those that knew and wanted to tear them in pieces. It is being suggested that if we would not have given the warning, then this vision might have come to pass, and the fireball would have hit Nashville, and we would have been accused for not giving the warning while we knew.
Now, of course, we talked about this. I mean, the people who say that they knew that this would happen, but they did not think it would be so soon. Back when we were originally looking at this, when Jeff was talking about these visions, he was interpreting it, in my understanding at least, that this wasn't us that they were asking, but it was Seventh-day Adventists who knew about the vision, or people who had heard the reports or whatever. They weren't asking us, because we wouldn't say, well, we knew, we didn't think it was so soon. That really wouldn't make sense if we believed it was July 18th. So
how would you see it? I'm trying to I'm struggling with the idea, because you're saying they are talking to nominal Adventists. That's what you're trying to say?
that was the position we took.
Okay.
And that was what I understood way back then. This wasn't talking to us, because there were nominal Adventists who know about Nashville being. I mean, I knew about it, from years ago. So I mean, it wasn't completely buried. I mean, that's why when you asked me about it, I just said Nashville, because I knew that there was a vision regarding Nashville being hit by a fireball.
But are they then talking to Adventists living in Nashville, or just?
Well, either living or around Nashville. Yeah, that's the way that I interpreted it. Always, whenever I first read it. Because once we made the prediction, I mean, obviously we wouldn't be the ones saying, well, we didn't think it would come so soon. That would only have been if it happened before July 18th, then we might have said that. But I think for most Adventists, they would see, oh, this is just something way in the future. They would think that this is the judgments of God that come during the plagues or something like that. They wouldn't see it as an event that's going to precede the Sunday law or anything like that.
Yeah. All right, that's possible scenario perhaps, but it does make sense to me that if people national knew, or Adventists knew, why they would still continue to live in Nashville.
Well, because they think it's not going to happen so soon. They're looking at it as something way in the future. I mean, they don't think Jesus is coming back anytime soon.
Right.
So yeah, so these events for the average Adventist would quite catch them off guard, but it wouldn't catch us off guard.
Okay. So yeah, we looked at the natural vision, and I'm going to share my screen right now. If you can see it.
Yep.
And we were talking also about the Sunday law at 9/11. From the viewpoint that we always said that Islam prevented the Sunday law from being implemented.
Mhm.
And we expected Islam to strike again at July 18.
Mhm.
And we were suggesting that there were not really visible signs.
Well, see, for us from the 1990s, there definitely was a Sunday law in the works. So, I mean, you see that in Jeff's papers, all the documentation. Any Adventist who was looking at the Sunday law in the 90s with the moral majority and all the events that were happening, we were expecting a Sunday law. You know, you had Pope John Paul with his, whatever they call it, I can't remember the name of it, but his paper. Yeah. So from the perspective of what was happening, it appeared that a Sunday law was imminent. 9/11 definitely changed what was happening. It wasn't a catalyst that brought about a Sunday law sooner. It did delay the Sunday law from the perspective of those who were studying the issue of the Sunday law in the 90s. That's why Jeff took that position, because in his view, because we've been studying all of his writings prior to 9/11, they're definitely looking for a Sunday law. And you can see it is in the works in the 90s. So I would take the position that that attack changed the picture, changed the landscape, and delayed a Sunday law.
Yes, I definitely agree that 9/11 changed the landscape, and I also believe that they were working on a Sunday law, but I don't believe that it would have had any success if they would have enforced it around 2001, around 9/11, because there was not really let's say a major crisis. I mean, we all had jobs and houses and food. We have American football on TV. People went on holidays, and so in that sense, I didn't really see a major crisis like the world is in major distress with pandemics all over the place in the United States, or people dying on the streets, etc. Major chaos and
well, remember, national apostasy is followed by national ruin. The national ruin doesn't bring about the national apostasy. Now, I think 9/11 changed the landscape and delayed the Sunday law, but now we have a whole different generation and a whole different set of issues that we never imagined before. Now, ifs are big things. Hindsight's 50-50, not 20/20, because you don't know what would have happened if 9/11 hadn't occurred.
Yeah.
Right. So to think that things are just going to continue on as they were, there could have been so many other different things, so many different people involved, things in the Middle East or whatever, just things that we can't foresee because 9/11 changed what happened. So that would be my position on that. Because that's Jeff's position. Jeff's position is that a Sunday law was in the works in the 90s, and that 9/11 hindered that Sunday law. That Sunday.
Yeah.
Now, things have changed, and so we're in a different kind of history now. Different group of people. It's a much more, obviously prophecy happens the way it happens. But we know right now we're in a situation where the king of the North and the king of the South are continuing on in this struggle. And our position seems to be, at least with a lot of us, is that the United States is now controlled, or we would say the king of the South has moved to the United States. So
Right.
the king of the South is not the Soviet Union, it's the USA. In that context, more specifically, the Democrats.
Okay. But
Which is globalism, right? So the globalists are the king of the South. The UN becomes the king of the South, not the Soviet Union, or not Russia. And that would be a difference. That's a change that we're still evaluating.
right. But one thing we saw resulting from 9/11 was we talked about it last week, was the Patriot Act.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a direct result from the attacks.
Well, the Patriot Act was actually prepared because of the attacks on the World Trade Center in 1993 and other events that were happening. So, because it was already prepared at 9/11, they were going to pass the Patriot Act even if 9/11 hadn't occurred. It wasn't caused by 9/11.
I don't know about
This had been something that had been prepared for a long time. Now, some of the conspiracy theorists say, well, they couldn't have passed the Patriot Act if it hadn't been for 9/11. But I lived through that history, and I can tell you that there was definitely already a fear of what was going to happen with Islam. So 9/11 didn't all of a sudden bring Islam into the fore. It was already there, even going back to the 70s. But with what had happened in the Gulf War and then what happened in 1993, America was preparing to bring measures to stop such attack that eventually did happen at 9/11.
But it's strange then, if it was already 1993, why they would wait 8 years?
Well, it wasn't ready in 93. Because of the event in 93, they had begun, and even before 93, to prepare this Patriot Act. It was, remember, administrations change and a lot of different things happen in between. So, because you had George Bush Sr., who was involved with, the war in Kuwait, and then George Bush Jr., who was involved with what happened later on. But, and there was a lot of different, you have to remember, there's lots of different things happening, lots of different interests and so forth. Different presidents are going to have different priorities, but they had already prepared the Patriot Act, and it was prepared under the Democrats, not under the Republicans.
But in any case, it's convenient then that, in that sense, that 9/11 happened.
No, but they would have passed it anyway. it wasn't like they needed a 9/11 event to pass the Patriot Act.
But I mean, the Patriot Act it's instrumental for implementing a future Sunday law.
Yeah, but I just don't think you needed 9/11 to get the Patriot Act. You didn't need, I mean, we already had terrorism happening in the 90s, and it was already a fear. So, like when the World Trade Center hit, everybody knew who it was because we already were under threat. I mean, constantly in the news, and definitely, you know, the governments knew about these threats that were happening, and they were seeking everything they could to try to have intelligence to know what was going to happen. So, I mean, they knew about the attack on the World Trade Center before it happened, but they constantly had reports of all kinds of terrorist activities that were going to occur. And so they had the information, the threat, but it was weeding out which threat is real, which one is not real. And so that's why the Patriot Act was being prepared for a lot of years to actually deal with the problem, this constant threat of terrorism. So it would have been implemented even if 9/11 had not occurred. You don't need a 9/11 event to get the Patriot Act enacted.
Yeah, but in the end, it was due to terrorism that they.
Right. Right. It was due to terrorism, but that terrorism had been going on long before 9/11. And that's why they were preparing the Patriot Act. So, I mean, nobody expected that it would be such a calamitous event. They weren't, you know, they might have imagined that there would be a lot of hijackings, there might be some bombings. There was a lot of worry about nuclear bombs or dirty bombs prior to 9/11. So, you know, especially once Russia had fallen, the focus started to shift to Islam. So, you know, I don't buy the argument that they needed 9/11 to bring in the Patriot Act because there was already the political will to do so.
And of course, we had 1995 with the Oklahoma bombing, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and
they were also concerned about internal terrorism as well. So they weren't just concerned. You know, the American government is always concerned about what's happening with all these different militia groups and so forth. I mean, what happened with Waco and Ruby Ridge? I mean, they have this fear that the people are going to overthrow the government, the people in power. So, you know, so all through the 80s, all through the 90s, there was this fear about Islam. And that's why the Patriot Act was prepared. So, you know, it's not something that you needed 9/11 in order to get it enacted. It would have been enacted even if 9/11 never occurred.
All right. But yeah, from the perspective of 9/11 inside job, it all seems very convenient. So I'm trying to suggest that if they would have proclaimed a Sunday law just out of the blue, then there was not really a major reason to proclaim one. It wouldn't have a big chance of success. People would object to it, especially the unbelievers, the non-Christians. I think it would have encountered massive nationwide resistance. But yeah, instead we know from inspiration that a Sunday law will be introduced only after the Protestants will demand for it themselves.
Which was happening in the 90s.
Okay.
Much more than it is now.
All right.
So, because what you had with the Protestants in the 90s is the moral majority was extremely powerful. They were looking to have a Republican president to bring about morality. Right now, most Protestants, like true Protestants, are libertarian and constitutionalists. And you actually don't have the environment right now to bring in a Sunday law. Much less likely now than it would have been in if what had continued, what was happening in the 90s had continued on. And that's the problem that I have, is because the world's become way more secular since the 90s. So, and especially America is way more secular than it was since the 90s. It was much more religious. So we seem to be moving further away from a Sunday law in the way that we imagined it was going to occur. But what we're doing is we're moving towards a Sunday law that's going to happen differently than we imagined. Yeah. That's what it seems like, is that our ideas of what was going to bring about a Sunday law, we basically have to look at the whole issue over again and try to understand, in such a secular society, and it's not just the United States, it's the world as well. So the world has to want this Sunday law. Yeah. And that was always the problem for me personally, is sure, you had Protestants in the 90s who wanted the Sunday law, but that was pretty much just in the United States. Nowhere else in the world would you ever be able to sell a Sunday law. It was so secular. But now we see that there's all the events that have unfolded, especially with the election of Joe Biden, has shown that the world is very different than we imagined it to when the Sunday law is introduced. And so you understand my point, right? Mm-hmm. That it no matter how you slice it, a Sunday law is not the first thing that people would want to go to, because they're not religious. And especially the United States, it appears to be the majority not interested in religion at all, because this new generation is completely different than their parents were.
Right, but I'm trying to suggest here life was going on. There wasn't total panic in the streets.
Yeah, but you see my point, because when I look at what you've written here about a Sunday law, you're setting a scenario about what's going to cause the Sunday law that I think is false. This is what we used to believe. We needed to have this crisis, but the crisis is connected to calamities, and it is connected to financial crisis and so forth. But remember, national apostasy is followed by national ruin. The Sunday law is not enacted initially in the United States because of calamities, financial crisis, natural disasters, etc. It has a different motive. And this is the thing that we're discovering, is that motive that we had imagined, or the way that we figured that this was going to work itself out, in the 90s made sense. But in 2021, it doesn't make sense. And so we have to reevaluate how we imagine the Sunday law was to come in. And I think what we're seeing is that first we need this what we see happening right now, this radical left movement with the LGBTQ and whatever the things are, all this crazy stuff that's happening, and a reaction to that. So you have to, basically, it's correcting the car. You're going into one ditch, you crank the steering wheel, and you're going to end up in the other ditch. Without that, Americans wouldn't come to bring in a Sunday law. So it's this civil war in the United States that's going on between the King of the North and the King of the South, between the Republicans and the Democrats, that actually is going to lead to this Sunday law. And that was what was going to happen in Ellen White's day as well. The Sunday law was going to be connected to that Civil War if it had come about.
All right. So let's skip to
Because we went through some of this already. So the English law, Roman law, the Corona pandemic.
We talked about that, yes.
So this is another point. So you have this paragraph here, but concerning 9/11, it seems that Islam did not prevent the implementation of a Sunday law, but rather instead, Islam was to bring us a step closer towards a new world order and a Sunday law. Now, what do we think that the new world order is? Like, who's in charge of that? Well, who's in charge of it? What is it?
Yeah, it's a global government where nations will surrender their national sovereignty.
Okay. Yeah, so this would be the UN is part of the New World Order, right?
Yes, yes.
Now, would you call the UN religious? Or is it a secular power? Is it a atheistic power?
They have some kind of new age ideas, right?
Which would be atheism.
Okay.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
So if we're, because what we were looking at, so, I mean, I remember this whole history because I've been through this all through the 80s and 90s. So we were looking for this new world order when George W. Bush or George Bush Sr. on September 11th, I think it was 1990 or 1991. I can't remember which. But he announced that we're bringing about this new world order of peace, right?
Yes.
So there was this idea, at least that Adventists had, that somehow the United States was working with the papacy, and the papacy was in charge of this new world order. But I think what we have is actually different powers vying for the control of the world. You have atheistic secular powers vying for the control of the world. You have the papacy vying for the control of the world. And you have the United States, which had been vying for the control of the world. But now the United States, under people like Biden, is actually seeking to join with the New World Order. That is, they're seeking to be more secular, more atheistic. They're not interested in Protestantism. But we know that the Babylon is divided into three parts: the dragon, the beast, and the false prophet. And if the United States is controlled by the New World Order, it's no longer the false prophet. It's part of the New World Order. It's part of the UN. So, and I've been thinking a lot about this, and Stephen and I have had some conversations here and there on the Zoom before our studies and sometimes during studies. But if we're going to take what the Bible says, wouldn't it be that the Protestants, in order to bring in the Sunday law, they have to, in a sense, overthrow the United Nations? That they have to win the battle. The King of the North, the Republicans, have to win a battle against globalism and subdue it. Because this is what Jeff was teaching. He was teaching that Trump would be the head of the UN. And that made sense. But it doesn't make sense that the New World Order itself, in taking over the United States, is going to run a Sunday law. It wouldn't be interested in any kind of religious Sunday law.
Yeah, I believe a Sunday law will be implemented in the United States before the New World Order comes to power.
Yeah, but it wouldn't be implemented by people like Joe Biden or Kamala Harris?
I don't know.
Well, they would have no interest in it because the UN wouldn't have an interest in the Sunday law either.
No. But that's why I think a major crisis will make.
But why would a
Yeah.
major crisis bring about a Sunday law? That's what I don't understand. The crises come in response to the Sunday law, not the other way around, according to Spirit of Prophecy. Now, it's going to ramp up as these calamities occur. But the initial Sunday law is national apostasy.
Right.
So
I think
you have to have the national apostasy first, which is the
yes.
Sunday law, right?
So Sunday law is national apostasy, right?
And it's followed by national ruin.
Yeah. So I think
Sunday
the
law
national ruin.
The national ruin is all these things that are then going to follow.
I don't necessarily think so. I think national ruin could be just the loss of sovereignty that the nation dissolved, that they have to give or ask help from the United Nations to help them, sort of like that the nation just is about to be destroyed completely and losing its sovereignty, not able to function as a nation anymore. But when I think about national ruin, I think about things like that, following national apostasy, following the implementation of the Sunday law.
Well, Ellen White says, this land has been the home of the oppressed, the witness for liberty of conscience, and the great center of scriptural light. God has sent messengers who have studied their Bibles to find what is truth and studied the movements of those who are acting their part in the fulfilling prophecy and bringing about the religious amendment, which is to make void the law of God and thus give ascendancy to the man of sin. And shall no voice be raised of direct warning to arouse the churches to their danger? Shall we have let things drift and let Satan have a victory without a protest? God forbid. So, I mean, we're going to see, when I read about this Sunday law in Ellen White's writings, it seems that the Sunday law comes first.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see that the initial act of the Sunday law is the result of a crisis.
Okay.
So unless you have some statements that I'm not aware of, right? We do know that she has statements regarding what's going to happen as time goes on when the judgments of God come upon the nation. But those are in response to the Sunday law, not the other way around.
Yeah, I will try and come up with some quotes.
Okay.
Where she seems to suggest that I don't have it here.
Because I haven't been able to find it. And I never, in all my years as an Adventist, ever got the impression from the Spirit of Prophecy that a crisis causes the Sunday law. So, and I haven't been able to find it recently either. I've looked. So,
okay.
but if you have something, definitely as it ramps up afterwards, then that's going to be another issue.
Yeah, I'm gonna try and find that quote, some quotes about that.
Okay.
But actually, I'm trying to suggest that Islam is being used as a scapegoat to serve the globalist agenda. Interesting that this on a personal note that in 2010, a whistleblower came forward claiming that his grandfather was connected to one of these secret societies. And he stated that already in the 1980s, they would openly discuss among themselves about blowing up the World Trade Center and detonating a nuclear weapon in a city somewhere in the USA to bring about the New World Order. And he claimed that Hillary Clinton was also part of this group, that she was also involved in the occult. So I found it interesting that this matched with the whole idea in this document. But I would mention it here. Yeah, how it all connects with the object of this document. We saw, of course, the World Trade Center coming down, and we expected a nuke to be dropped on Nashville on July 18. So yeah, so in that sense, it fits, of course, with the idea of this document. So I thought it was interesting. He doesn't mention any other sort of attacks or whatever. He just mentions the two, the World Trade Center and the nuclear weapon. So this.
Now, so of course, this is a person who says his grandfather told him these things in the 1980s. So it's kind of hearsay information.
Yeah, it is.
So and so we have no way of knowing whether what this person is saying is the truth. But if there was such a conspiracy, you definitely would have more than one person involved, and it's impossible to keep a conspiracy like that hid for so long.
I tried to contact this person.
What's that? You tried to contact them?
Yeah, he seems to be a real existing person. It's not fantasy. I mean,
So how would you know? How would you know that his grandfather was telling him the truth?
No, I don't know that, but I was
You know
trying
what
to
I'm
see.
saying?
Yeah, I know what you're saying, but I was trying to see if this person was real.
Oh, okay. If they're a real person.
If he was not making all these things up just for fun or something. But yeah, he is there with his name.
Yeah,
full name and the full name of his grandfather also, and I tried to check it out, and as far as I could check, it seems to be correct what he was stating about then his grandfather having this particular job or function, and he himself also he has a respectable job. He is a respectable person, so to say.
I mean, I'm not saying the guy's necessarily lying. I'm just saying whether his information that he got from his grandfather is true or not. So we don't know. And now, and when it comes to secret societies, like I've studied a lot into secret societies, there's all kinds of them. Some people believe they're all connected at the top through the Pope or through the Black Pope or something like that. But it's just, I mean, you say, well, blowing up the World Trade Center. I mean, he says that already in the 1990s. So whether he was told this, or in the 1980s, whether he was told this in the 1980s or his grandfather at some other point later told him about this, we don't know. But the idea of detonating a nuclear weapon in the city in the USA, I mean, that's been around for a long time. That's not particularly new. Hillary Clinton being involved in the occult, well, it's definitely possible. But still the problem bringing about a new world order, even if these groups, secret societies, have some kind of belief like this, even if it is true, it doesn't really fit in with what the Bible prophecy and Sister White says about what's going to happen. So the New World Order isn't really the Protestants in the United States bringing in a Sunday law. And to understand what this New World Order is, I mean, it's going to be different for different groups, whether you're the papacy or whether you're, you know, a person who's a globalist or whether you're, you know, a Protestant, American Protestant. It's going to be very different. So
Right.
you know, I'm just kind of skeptical of this type of information that it's meaningful.
Yeah, I understand, of course.
Yeah.
Going to the next subject about 9/11 still. We always said Islam will protect us so that we have more time to prepare, so that we can be sealed.
You mean based on Revelation 9?
Correct? Second.
Revelation 7?
That
would be Revelation 9.
I mean, about the sealing takes place, right? Till they are sealed in the forehead.
Okay, so you're talking about the sealing, and then you're connecting it to Revelation 9 with those that have the seal of God on their foreheads.
Correct.
They're not going to harm.
Right.
Okay, I see what you're saying.
Anyway, we believe that Islam will protect us from Rome. So I'm suggesting that if it is correct that 9/11 was an inside job, then we see that Islam is being accused for something they haven't done. And in that sense, yeah, Islam is being demonized, so to say. They are falsely accused.
Okay, but Islam takes credit for 9/11, and they're not being falsely accused of the attack of 9/11. I don't understand that. I mean, Islam is bringing this on themselves. I mean, they have definitely an agenda against Rome and against the United States. So it couldn't be a false accusation or a demonization of radical Islam, because radical Islam has these goals. And even people like Larry from Australia, who you know, believes that 9/11 was an inside job, he still believes that Islam tried to blow up the World Trade Center on, you know, February 26, 1993. So everybody recognized that Islam is the enemy of Rome and the enemy of the United States.
Yeah.
So I don't quite understand, because even if you believe that somehow the American government allowed 9/11 to happen or somehow worked with Islam, it wouldn't be a demonization of Islam, because Islam's already a demonic power.
Yeah, I understand that you don't understand. But a recent poll in Britain showed that 96% of British Muslims do not believe that Al Qaeda was behind the 9/11 attacks.
Yeah, but what does that mean? All it means is that they have bought into the propaganda that is anti-American. They themselves have promoted this propaganda that they weren't actually involved, but yet Al Qaeda was behind the attack. They took blame for the attack, and we could actually document that they did the attack. So what you have to believe is that all of that was just faked, and that Al Qaeda really had nothing to do with it, which really wouldn't make sense. Now, the only thing that could make sense is that the Americans allowed it, you know, but it would just be an attack that Al Qaeda did that the United States let down their guard and allowed it to occur. That would be the only scenario that I would even possibly think is reasonable.
Yeah. But I try to make this point in the light of the next
Yeah.
thing, which
Okay.
is Revelation 18, verse 1 to 3. Because we know that Sister White says that when the towers in New York are falling, Revelation 18 verses 1 to 3 will be fulfilled.
Mhm.
You have to do you have to quote? We talked about this quote already, right? I think in part 1.
From 9 testimonies.
Yes.
Yeah.
Don't
You know.
I don't have this quote here. But I'm guessing that we all know the quote where Sister White says that Revelation 18 verse 1 to 3 will be fulfilled when these towers fall, right? Maybe somebody can share this quote. Find this quote.
What terrible scenes will take place when the Lord shall arise to shake terribly the earth? Then the words of Revelation 18, 1 to 3 will be fulfilled. The whole of the 18th chapter of Revelation is a warning of what is coming on the earth. But I have no light in particular in regard to what is coming on New York. Only I know that one day the great buildings there will be thrown down by the turning and overturning of God's power. From the light given me, I know that destruction is in the world. One word from the Lord, one touch of his mighty power, and these massive structures will fall. Scenes will take place, the fearfulness of which we cannot imagine.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, that's the quote I was referring to. And if you read Revelation verse 1 to 3, was yeah, we can just read it. It talks about Babylon is fallen, is fallen. Verse 1 says, and after these things I saw another angel come down from heaven, having great power, and the earth was lightened with his glory. Going quickly, shortly to the other verses, 2 and 3. And he cried mightily with a strong voice, saying, Babylon the great is fallen, and has become the habitation of devils, and the hold of every false spirit, and the cage of every unclean and hateful bird. Verse 3, for all nations have drunk of the wine of the wrath of her fornication, and the kings of the earth have committed fornication with her, and the merchants of the earth are waxed rich through the abundance of the delicacies. So I'm trying to suggest that this light, the earth, lightened with his glory, that this light refers to Babylon in some way, being mentioned in verse 2, and that it refers especially to the sins of Babylon that is being mentioned in verse 2 and 3. And particular, the light is exposing the sins of Babylon. It has become the habitation of devils, and the hold of every false spirit, and the cage of every unclean and hateful bird. So
now, Ellen White says in connection with this, today God is still using his church to make known his purpose in the earth. Today, the heralds of the cross are going from city to city and from land to land, preparing the way for the second advent of Christ. The standard of God's law is being exalted. The Spirit of the Almighty is moving upon men's hearts, and those who respond to its influence become witnesses for God and his truth. In many places, consecrated men and women may be seen communicating to others the light that is made plain to them, the way of salvation through Christ. And as they continue to let their light shine, as did those who were baptized with the Spirit on the day of Pentecost, they will receive more and still more of the Spirit's power. Thus, the earth is to be lightened with the glory of God. So we have to understand, and there's many, many other statements in the Spirit of prophecy that show that this is actually the proclamation of the gospel that is being spoken about. And what's being shown here then in response is not that the sins of Babylon are being exposed by a light that happens at 9/11, but that this is the opposite side of things. So you have two things. You have the gospel being proclaimed through his servants, and then you have Babylon, the Protestant world, in a fallen state. So it's more of a contrast. They're not really connected in the way that you're trying to connect them.
Okay. But there's another quote from Sister White where she says we have to expose the wickedness of the man of sin.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's proclaiming. Obviously, that's one of the things we do, but that's the man of sin. And you're dealing with the Protestant. You're saying that the light that's lightening the earth with its glory is exposing the Protestant sin, tying that somehow to 9/11, that the Americans' sin was, the inside job of 9/11 in some ways. Right?
Not necessarily just 9/11, but
Yeah, but other things. But I don't think that that's what this light is being talked about. So yes, we're supposed to expose the wickedness of the man of sin, but that's not connected with the light, the earth being lightened with God's glory at 9/11. Those aren't the same things. Right? Because we have a direct statement where she says, thus the earth is to be lightened with the glory of God. So she's talking about the proclamation of the gospel, not the revealing of secret societies and what's happening behind the scenes in the United States.
But I'm saying this because verse 1 is followed by verse 2 where it says directly Babylon the Great is fallen.
Right, but I'm saying that these are in a contrast between the giving of the gospel and the condition of the church.
Okay.
So these are contrasts, not one exposing the other.
All right. But when it says, and it's become the habitation of devils and hold of every foul spirit, in the cage of every unclean and hateful bird, I was trying to think what could it mean? What would be the interpretation thereof concerning in connection with 9/11? Because she says at 9/11 these verses are being fulfilled. And then in my mind it fits with the inside job explanation.
Yeah, I don't think it does. But the one thing that you have to take in consideration here, so we know at 9/11 we don't have Revelation 18 verse 4 fulfilled, right?
3.
Okay, you agree with that? It's just 1 to 3.
Yes.
Okay, so when you look at the issue, because we know what happened in Millerite history. So we line 9/11 up with two different events. What are those events?
We line 9/11 with April 19 and the arrival, the second angel message also, and the confirmation, the empowerment of the first August 11, 1840.
Right, August 11th, 1840. So now, why is 9/11 lined up with April 19th? What is being marked there?
Why is 9/11 marked up with April 19?
Yeah, so why are we marking it there?
the Babylon is fallen. Second, right of the second angel's message.
Yeah.
And the Protestants, the close probation for the Protestant churches.
Okay. Now, so when we line it up at 9/11, whose probation is closing at 9/11?
The Advent, you mean the Protestant churches?
Well, it's not the Protestant church's probation closing at 9/11.
Or the Adventist church, you mean general?
The Adventist church, right? So
Right,
they
yeah.
have a probation that closes for the leadership or the organized church at 9/11, right? And that parallels the door being closed for the Protestants.
Right.
And then the door is going to close for Adventists at the Sunday law, just as it did for the Millerites on October 22nd, 1844, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Right. So if we look at 9/11 and we're trying to tie it in to Babylon has fallen, we know that we mark 9/11 as the fall for the Seventh-day Adventist Church, but we don't mark the Protestants there. Where do we mark the Protestants?
When the fall is complete, you mean?
Yeah, we mark it at the Sunday law, correct?
Yes, yes.
Okay. So this is it. It's not a problem, but it's not a point that isn't well understood. So we know that the first horn falls, the Protestant horn falls at April 19th.
Mm-hmm.
But we know that the Republican horn falls at the Sunday law, or at least just prior to the Sunday law under the image of the beast test, correct?
Right.
So when Ellen White says that Revelation 18 is fulfilled at this event, it begins to be fulfilled at this event, but you can't say that the Protestant horn fell at 9/11, unless you're trying to say that that's what happened. But that's not what we've taught. We've always taught that it's at the Sunday law, based on Ellen White's statements.
Yes, I understand.
Yeah, okay, good.
But I'm trying to say that it's the beginning of a progressive fall.
Right. But if it's the beginning of a progressive fall, then you're trying to say then that the inside job is the beginning of that.
Right.
And you're going to then try to connect it to the Patriot Act, which is going to lead to the Sunday law. That would be your argument, correct?
Right.
Okay.
Thanks. But yeah, if it's true that these people behind this attack that are working towards this new world order that are having a secret agenda, if it's true that they are dabbling with the occult, if it's true that they are, like for instance, Walter White testifies, or what's the name, Roger Monod, right? He's talking about these occult groups that mess around with spiritism. I'm suggesting that first two, when these towers fell, that it shows that exactly like it says, they have become a habitation of devils and hold of every foul spirit, cage of every unclean and hateful bird. Because if you look close to the 9/11 events, there's a lot of occult symbology there, which I haven't put in here, but seems to show that these people are really into occult stuff, and they are being led on by by demons.
Well, and definitely what we did in the past is we connected it to Pentecostalism, the charismatic movement that had moved through the Protestant churches. And so it wasn't so much about overt occultism that was the issue with Babylon. Like the Jews of old, they just had adopted many of the beliefs of the nations around them. Because, definitely you're not going to say that most Americans are involved directly in the occult who are Protestants, but they are indirectly involved through the type of worship that they do.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So the whole celebration movement, just all the crazy stuff that's went on in the 90s, especially. And this is one of the things that Jeff is documenting. So in Jeff's book, The Time of the End magazine, or The Time of the End, what he's done there is he's really clearly marked out how the Sunday law is going to come about. So we went through that in fine detail. And what he kept seeing is that the Sunday law was coming, and he had all these reasons because of all this false worship. Now, Ellen White says that a partial fall happened to the Protestants in the time of the Millerites, but it wasn't complete. But in our history, there's a complete fall. Now, so this is a religious issue in some ways, as well as a civil issue, right? Because we know that the second horn is republicanism. And the way that we would have seen this back in the 1990s is you would see that the Republican Party was connected with the moral majority and pushing, to bring about all these moral reforms. But now you don't see that happening. So 9/11 doesn't really provide that connection to Protestantism that we need, because Babylon the Great is fallen, is Protestant America, according to Ellen White, not just some leaders who are dabbling in the occult.
Yeah, but
and then also for to make all nations drink of the wine of the wrath of her fornication. This is really pushing towards the Sunday law itself.
Mm-hmm.
But you kind of see my point. Like, I really think that we have to almost rethink everything that we thought about the Sunday law, of where it comes from and how it's formed. And I don't think that the New World Order is really the answer in the sense of we've been through the New World Order and how it's working. And right now the United States is controlled by the New World Order, if you want to put it that way. I mean, it's not Republican anymore. But it's interesting to see what's going to happen with Trump, whether he comes back into power, but this time to clean up the United States much more directly than what he was trying to do. He was trying to do it through the Constitution, but it may be, whether it's Trump or someone else, in order to try to clean up the United States, they may have to do it some other way by setting aside the Constitution.
Yeah, I believe Trump we will see Trump come back one way or the other.
Yeah, whether it's him personally or just his policies. But
yeah, it's not in here. But since I mentioned Walter White and Roger Morneau,
when it comes to Morneau, I really don't want to hear that guy's voice or his name. He is not in any way valid, and I've looked into him, so I wouldn't take anything he says seriously. And basically, he is a messed up person. So I know Morneau, and the stuff that he teaches is satanic.
You knew him personally?
No, not personally. I've read his material.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So I've read his material, and he's not an honest person. Let's put it.
He was from Canada also, right?
Yeah. Okay. French Canadian. So it's not somebody that I would take any credence with, any credence in what he's saying. There's just, I'm not been impressed with the things that
Not a
he
big fan
says.
of this. All
But
right, okay.
I just don't think that we should go there. I don't want to record stuff about Morneau. I basically
Okay.
believe he's satanic himself. So
Wow.
yeah.
But anyway, just Walter White then. I mean, he is, from his own experience, talking about occult things also, these secret societies. Um, and I wonder how we position that aspect in our uh, dealings with present truth. Does it
Which
have
point are
any,
you talking about? I didn't catch what you said. So about Walter
uh,
White, what are you saying
yeah,
about Walter White?
he's talking about the occult, how these secret societies are also uh, involved with occultism.
Well, they
And
are occult. Secret societies are by definition occult groups.
yeah, and he's suggesting they have a lot of power. And is there any, how do we position that in, does it have any place with
Well, Jeff took the
present truth?
position that basically he didn't really want to hear anything about Walter White either, in that, I mean, the secret society issue, I mean, if you look back at what Jeff was teaching, there's a difference, quite a difference between what Jeff was teaching and Walter White is teaching.
Yes,
So
correct.
Walter White is focused a lot upon these secret societies. Now, Jeff, of course, was aware of them, that they exist, but they're not our enemy. That is, that it doesn't come through secret societies that we end up with the Sunday law in the United States, because secret societies aren't the dragon, the beast, or the false prophet per se. I mean, you could say that they're connected with the dragon power,
So
in that sense, but secret societies definitely aren't in control of anything in the United States or in the world. I mean, their secret societies exist. And I know
so
lots about secret societies and how they operate. I know people who were in secret societies. I knew John Carrington. He was from, his family was the Carringtons in the United States, a very wealthy family. And when he was a young man, he left the United States, because he avoided the draft. He didn't want to be involved in the war, so the Vietnam draft. And he came to Canada, and he ended up working at one of the self-supporting schools in British Columbia. He became the president there. He
okay.
died in an accident falling off a mountain. But John Carrington was somebody who I would consider a reliable source about what was happening in Freemasonry, which he was involved in. His family was.
Mhm.
So definitely we know that these higher up powers, these people in power in government, one of the ways that they get these connections is through these secret societies. So
Mhm.
so so that's a valid point, right? I mean, we know that secret societies exist, and they are by definition occultic. Um, but what we don't see is that secret societies have the type of control that they would need to bring things about on their own. That is, these powers aren't all united, except through Satan,
Yeah.
right? They're not united. I mean, they're the enemies of each other. So one of the things that Walter Weiss tries to bring out is that Islam was created by the Catholic Church, which of
I
course,
don't agree with that.
yeah, it would be crazy. But you have these types of ideas, but I don't think they align with what Ellen White is saying or what the Bible is saying about prophecy.
Yeah.
So, I don't put much credence on the fact that somehow secret societies are in control. They're definitely, each secret society is vying for its own ideas or what they want to accomplish. The only
Yeah.
connection they have is satanic.
Satan.
Yeah, so
In the
Satan
end,
becomes the
Satan
connection. Yeah,
is pulling the strings. Yeah.
you don't
But
need to
yeah,
be occultic to be controlled by Satan, because
that's
anybody
correct.
who's not under the control of the Spirit of Christ is controlled by Satan. And
But I wonder if there's
so you don't need the secret societies, is what I'm trying to say, to get the Sunday law to come into place. You just need evil people in power. And they could be occultists, they could be Catholics, they could be Protestants. Doesn't really matter. They don't need to be connected by some secret society in order to bring about their goals. So we know that we have the globalists who want to be in power with their values. We have the papacy that wants to be in power with its values. And we know that the United States had wanted to be in power with its values. But those are all coming together. We see the Pope really is now a globalist, and the United States is also a globalist. But is it the globalists who are going to bring about the Sunday law, and how that's going to happen? That we don't know yet. I don't think. And I don't think you can connect it. Well, maybe you can. Maybe there's something I don't see. But in the way that you're trying to connect it here to 9/11, being an inside job, I don't see that actually is useful for their goals.
right.
Right. And the same thing would go with the pandemic. The pandemic has shown, it's like a test run or something, that people can be controlled by fear, and the media can control people and put pressure upon governments to act in a particular way. Because even if the government person himself personally doesn't believe that the pandemic's a threat, he definitely can't act as if it's not a threat. He has to pretend that he cares, because otherwise the media will just eat him up, right? Just like what happened to Trump. And that's what they tried to do with Trump, is basically make an example of him. And it seems that they succeeded.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So that's where I think we need to be looking in when we're starting to look at the Sunday laws, to really understand what happened on January 6th. Because that is
Right.
connected to our July 18th.
Okay. And if you look at verse 3, all nations have drunk of the wine of the wrath of her fornication, and the kings of the earth have committed fornication with her, and the merchants of the earth are waxed rich through the abundance of the delicacies. Yeah, I'm wondering, is this not suggesting a conspiracy here? The kings of the earth conspiring with
Well, no.
Babylon, so to say.
How would that be a conspiracy? I mean, the kings of the earth had committed fornication. So this means that the rulers and the powers of the earth are
Conspiring with.
Well, it doesn't say conspiring. It says committed fornication. I mean, it doesn't talk about. It doesn't mean that there's a global conspiracy, but it does mean they've committed fornication. So what does it mean to commit fornication from a biblical point of view when it comes to a political power?
They're in partnership.
Right. So they're in a relationship.
Yeah. Partnership.
Well, partnership,
Partner, like,
but I would say a relationship is a better way of looking at it. It's a relationship with the woman in control.
And are we saying that her there in that verse is the papacy?
Yes.
Or could it possibly also be maybe United States or United Nations?
No, because it's Babylon.
It's definitely the papacy.
Yeah, because it's Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots, right? So it's already defined who Babylon the Great is. So this is the papacy.
So then the question for me is, does the papacy somehow, how do they do this part here in the final sentence there? The merchants of the earth are waxed rich through the abundance of her delicacies. So does that mean the papacy is somehow helping them financially, or is there how does that unfold with the merchants of the earth being rich through her delicacies? Because I know the papacy is very wealthy as well, right?
Yeah, well,
are they supporting
are you asking Odylio, or are you asking me?
Either one. I'm just curious, how does that unfold?
Can I respond to that?
Yeah.
I wanted to address this point because it's interesting. Just looking at 9/11, how the owner of the building, and we know the story, Larry Silverstein, however you pronounce it, he just before months before 9/11, he purchased these buildings, and he
Right.
doubled up on the insurance amount.
Right. I remember that. Yeah.
So he walked away with $4.5 billion. So just there we see.
But wouldn't we need to understand this symbolically? I don't think we would take this literally.
Well, the towers came
That's
down
my
literally,
question.
right?
Yeah.
The towers came down literally. It was a literal
Yeah,
event.
I know, but that's what I'm saying is it wouldn't be in, yeah, the towers came down literally, but we don't have a prophecy where we take the towers down literally, right? The prophecy in the Bible doesn't talk about towers coming down literally. So
No,
at 9/11, right?
but just to make an application, but not just that. I mean, there was an office there exactly on the floor, 90 something floor. It was called Marsh and McLennan, and it was an accounting, something with accountancy or something, and the or they were dealing with stocks and options, and it's an interesting story that one of the employees, he discovered some illegal trading, and he mentioned this to his superior in the World Trade Center, and they told him just to leave it alone, just to shut up. And he also mentioned it to some of his colleagues that he could trust, and they all saw that he was correct. There was some illegal stuff going on.
Yeah. Well, yes, I just don't see how this is relevant. I mean, to this prophecy, when we start looking at the merchants and what they symbolize,
Yeah,
this is talking about false religion. It's not talking about money. And we can also see that when Babylon has fallen, you see, because we've compared this with other scriptures when we were studying Ezekiel and Jeremiah. So I think you're taking it too literally, especially to try to nail it down to 9/11. It's some kind of, people had some kind of financial gain. That's not what's being talked about here. It's not really about financial gain. It has to do with religion, not with money. So her delicacies, the papacy's delicacies, are its doctrines, not its wealth.
Who are the merchants then?
Well, those are just the people selling those delicacies. So it's using this as a symbol. And Ellen White actually basically says it in, where is it here? So she's going to talk, she's going to comment on these chapters here. This is in Collected Messages, Book 2, page 67 and 68. And she says, after these things, I saw another angel come down from heaven, having great power, and the earth was lightened with his glory. And he cried mightily with a strong voice, saying, Babylon the great is fallen, and is become the habitation of devils, and the hold of every foul spirit, and a cage of every unclean and hateful bird. For all nations have drunk of the wine of the wrath of her fornication. And so we're not taking that as literal. We understand that as symbolic. Drinking is her doctrines. That's one symbol. And the kings of the earth have committed fornication with her. And the merchants of the earth have waxed rich through the abundance of her delicacies. And I heard another voice from heaven. So she quotes the verse. And then she says, I sit as a queen, I shall not see sorrow. The whole chapter shows that Babylon that has fallen is the churches who will not receive the messages of warning the Lord has given in the first, second, and third angels' messages. They refused the truth and accepted a lie. They refuse the messages of truth. See 2 Thessalonians 2, verse 11 to 12. The message in the 18th chapter of Revelation is plainly and clearly defined. For all nations have drunk of the wine of the wrath of her fornication, and the kings of the earth have committed fornication with her, and the merchants of the earth have waxed rich through the abundance of her delicacies. Anyone who reads this chapter need not be deceived. How Satan would exalt to have a message go broadcast that the only people whom God has made the repositories of his law are the ones to whom this message applies. The wine of Babylon is the exalting of the false and spurious Sabbath, which the Lord Jehovah hath blessed and sanctified for the use of man. Also, it is the immortality of the soul. These kindred heresies and the rejection of the truth convert the church into Babylon. Kings, merchants, rulers, and religious teachers are all in corrupt harmony. So this is the harmony that they're involved in, is the selling of religion. It's the selling of the false doctrines. That's the point that she's making. So to try to say that this has something to do with 9/11 and, you know, some office and some people were involved in some crime and they had to have the plane destroy the building so that these records were destroyed, really doesn't, to me, that's extremely weak reasoning. And taking things that are talking about spiritual things and bringing them down to something that
literal.
It doesn't seem to follow for me.
Right.
Hey man, that's a good quote. I just wanted to add to that for the delicacies. It goes further to say eager desire. So there's the papacy having that eager desire, her delicacies.
Yeah, it's the attractiveness of sin through those false doctrines. Okay, so you got about 5 minutes to wrap it up. I don't know, are you going to need another day or?
No, I think we can wrap it up right here.
Okay.
People can read the document if they're interested.
Okay. Yeah, and you know, I know I keep interrupting you all the time, which, you know, maybe that's not polite, but I mean, I'm talking a lot and it's your study, but
it's your channel. I mean, I'm just.
But yeah, I really do appreciate you presenting this stuff, and I just think there's a bunch of things that we need to look at, especially in connection with Nero, because I really think that that's one of the keys is Nero, to understand what happened,
Right.
And the connection between July 18th and Nero. But we have other connections too, so Nero isn't the only one. But anyway, if you want to close up.
Yeah, then we can just end it. There's was one more section about Millerite history being repeated.
Well, that's probably an important point. I mean, because talking about the conditionality of events, dealing with the second coming as well.
Right.
Can you just kind of explain it? What you see as far as the conditionality in Millerite history?
It would take more than 5 minutes.
Okay.
Maybe perhaps next week.
Yeah. Well, I'd like you to do this next week.
Me too.
Because I think we need to look a little bit more at Millerite history in connection with this. And
Amen.
So I would like to see you present some more about this. And if we can put this on the whiteboard maybe, or you could draw some things out. Because I think there's something that we had been missing prior to July 18th, when we were looking for the connection with July 18th and the Sunday law. And I believe that we have found the answer in Millerite history.
Okay.
So
Yeah, then let's talk about this next week.
Yeah, okay. Do you want to close with prayer?
Right. Let's do that. Father in heaven, thank you for this opportunity to discuss this topic, Lord. Thank you for the things that we have read, we've been talking about. Please help us to discern these things correctly. Help us understand the symbology and the correct interpretation of these things. Help us to come back next week and finish this topic. Please open our eyes, prepare our hearts, that we are willing and able to receive the truths that you are trying to reveal to us. Harden not our hearts, Lord, and help us to understand and open our minds and hearts, Lord. Thank you, Lord. I ask you these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Thanks a lot.
No, thanks.
Amen.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Odylio.
Thanks. Thank you.
Okay, take care, everyone. Have a good
See you
day.
next week.
Yeah.
You too. Thanks, guys.
Bye. Bye.